Ready to move to the next level in your product career? I'm Shobhit from Intentional Product Manager. Join me as we discuss ways to help you stand out in your job search and your career so you can have more impact and make more money. Hey everyone, welcome to the Intentional Product Manager podcast. Today I have a very special guest. And I say that many times, but really I've followed Ravi Mehta's career for a long time. Ravi is a senior product executive. I've known him since the days he was a VP at TripAdvisor. Then he went on to be a director at Facebook, then chief product officer at Tinder, and recently he's been entrepreneur in residence at Reforge. Ravi is also a very well-known, respected thought leader, and he's written on product strategy, leadership, product careers. And look, even in our program, Intentional Job Search, we often refer people to some of Ravi's thought leadership articles on product management careers, defining your shape, and whatnot. We'll get into all of that, but Ravi, welcome to our podcast and really great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited for the conversation.
So, Ravi, I told the audience a bit about you, but I would love to hear your product journey. How did you get into product management? I'll ask you a bunch of questions, but let's get started there.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. I actually got into product management by happy accident. So I've loved technology almost my whole life. My dad, in the early days of personal computers, was working with Apple on some things for his work, and decided to bring home an Apple IIc computer, which is this little tiny computer, almost looked like a laptop. And I just was fascinated by it. I started to play around with it, started to learn to code, and that kicked off a lifelong passion for technology. I went to undergraduate for computer engineering. I dropped out for a little bit to run a game company full time. Then I went back and finished up my degree, and I was like, I should probably get a real job. And so I actually graduated, and not to date myself, but at a really fortunate time. It was the middle of the Web 1.0 bubble. And so there were lots of engineering opportunities. And so I talked to a bunch of companies. I'm like, I should probably get a real job. I should get something, B2B or something like that. And one of the interviews I had was with Microsoft. And at the time, Microsoft said, we're making a really big investment in games. We like the fact that you came from a game company. And so there's sort of an interesting overlap with things that I had already done before. And so I went into interview at Microsoft, and I found the interviews very different than all the other engineering interviews that I had been in. It was a lot more about users and specs and requirements and strategy. Not getting up on the whiteboard and coding, which was what I was expecting. And then about halfway through the day, the recruiter came in and said, I'm really sorry, but we put you in the wrong track. We actually put you in product management interviews, or at Microsoft, it was called program management, rather than engineering interviews. Would you like to finish the day in the program management track, or would you like to come back tomorrow for engineering interviews? And at this point, I already had a couple offers. I thought this was really interesting. It was fascinating. It was a whole set of things that I hadn't really been thinking about, but had been doing sort of hands-on as running a game company. And so I just decided to finish the day out with program management interviews, and eventually got an offer to join Microsoft, and decided out of all my opportunities, that was the one that I wanted to pursue. And I haven't looked back ever since. I spent a little bit of time outside of product management. When I went to business school, I did a summer internship in management consulting, but I just always come back to, I love program management and product management. I love working with customers, working with teams to build products. And so over and over throughout my career, I've come back to it, and it's been a passion of mine.
Almost everyone tells me that I got into product management by accident. There's no defined path, but this was probably the wildest story I've ever heard. It's like being in the wrong track and still landing that job you were after.
Literally an accident. And it was really fortunate, because at the time, there wasn't a lot of people talking about product management. Microsoft had a growing product management discipline. A couple of other of the larger companies did. But this kind of triad of PMs, engineers, designers working closely together was really in its infancy.
Very cool. So tell me more, what happened to you? I assume this Microsoft program manager, that was pre-MBA?
This was, so I went right out of undergrad into Microsoft. I went into the games group, but shortly after I joined, the Xbox initiative got funded, and there's a whole story behind, Valentine's Day dinner, interrupting it with Bill Gates and his wife to get approval for the Xbox, and ultimately Microsoft approved. I think it was $1 or $2 billion at the time, a massive investment to uh, basically take Microsoft's success in the desktop and move it into the living room. And so as that team formed, I got to be one of the first 20 or so people on the Xbox team, initially working on Xbox Live. So thinking about it in terms of what are the platform capabilities that we want. And then over my time at Microsoft, I spent time on the platform side, but most of my time was on the product and game side, where we were thinking about how to build massively multiplayer games. The idea being that Microsoft's sort of critical advantage in the console wars, which had been traditionally dominated by companies like Sony and Nintendo, Microsoft's advantage was to come in with a really deep understanding of the internet and how networked multiplayer gaming was going to change how people buy and how people play games. And so I got to work on that problem for about 6 years at Microsoft on both the content side and on the platform side. After about 6 years, I really felt like, I had gotten into product management by accident. There were a whole set of things that I didn't feel like I had a deep enough foundation in around strategy and finance and marketing and all the different pieces that go into being a really good business thinker. So I decided to go to business school. I did my MBA at MIT. And then coming out of MIT, rather than go to the track of management consulting, which is something that I experimented with over the summer, I joined an early stage startup as basically founder and employee number one. And since then, I've had, and happy to talk more about this, roles at all sorts of stages for companies, anywhere from big tech like Meta all the way down to just a handful of people working in a room on a really tough problem. And the common thread throughout my career has been, one, a love of building products, and then two, almost everything that I've worked on has been consumer oriented, and almost everything has had a social element to it. So ultimately, the thing that really drives me is, how do you use technology to put people together in a way that creates value for them? The value could be utility, like being able to find the right hotel to stay at on vacation, or it could be entertainment, and that's something that I worked on at Meta, for example.
Love it. I also did management consulting in my summer, and I unfortunately gave into the peer pressure and went into it later. And a lot of people do that after the MBA. So let's go now and explore a future in your career. So you were at TripAdvisor, then at Meta, and then Tinder. I would love to know a bit more about the day-to-day and the core challenges you were tackling. Maybe the core skill sets that you were building in all these different roles. Now, these might seem very similar, but I'm sure there's massive differences in how each company works and the skill sets you need to succeed. So I would love it if you could talk through that.
Really different. And I think, as I look back at my career, the 5 years that I spent at TripAdvisor were the most formative. They really pushed me on some of the hardest challenges and helped me refine my take on how to approach product management and product leadership. I joined TripAdvisor in 2012. I'd been at a startup. It was a company started by Brian Balfour, who's now the CEO of Reforge. The company was called Viximo, and we were building out a platform for people to be able to add microtransactions and virtual goods to their products. This was in the very early days of in-app purchases. And so we were creating a platform that enabled people to add in-app purchases really quickly and easily. We sold that company to Tapjoy, which is a mobile advertising company, and I was looking out for what was next. And I had been a fan of TripAdvisor for a long time. It's something that we used every time we traveled. And it would never steer us wrong. If we went to hotels that were well rated on TripAdvisor, we felt like we would always have a great time. And so it just so happened that TripAdvisor was looking to build out its product organization, in part because the company had just been rolled out from Expedia. So TripAdvisor is an interesting story where it started as a startup, got product market fit pretty early on, and was really optimized for the growing distribution channel of SEO. So if you think about it, search engine optimization is hungry for unique and valuable content, and TripAdvisor was one of the first user-generated content companies. And so was able to just get this great match between what users want and a fast-growing distribution channel. And so shortly after it was founded, it got acquired by Expedia and then was part of Expedia for many years. But what the leadership of Expedia realized is that TripAdvisor and Expedia are solving different things, and that actually the enterprise value of the companies separately could be much greater than the enterprise value of them combined. And so they decided to IPO TripAdvisor out of Expedia, and I joined right around that time. And so that meant strategically we could start to do a number of things that just didn't make sense as part of Expedia. So one was adding the ability to book directly on TripAdvisor, which would have cannibalized Expedia's business, but made total sense now that TripAdvisor was independent. And so I started working on a small team. It was called the core product team at TripAdvisor, with a really ambitious goal to make it easier for people to price shop, for people to be able to book on TripAdvisor on hotels, as well as start to book other types of categories on TripAdvisor, like restaurants and attractions. And so over the time that I was there, my team grew considerably. The company grew considerably. And that was a moment in my career where I felt like I had a lot of opportunity. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later in the conversation. It was a moment where I felt like I had a lot of opportunity that was sort of disproportionate to my experience. And I had to grow really, really quickly. But by taking that opportunity and really taking advantage of it, was able to learn a lot, hopefully create a lot of value along the way. And it set me up for what I would do later at Meta and at Tinder, leading product teams in a different product area.
I want to just double click into one of the things you said. So opportunity disproportionate to your experience. What are the characteristics one would look at if they want such an amazing opportunity?
Yeah, I think there's two things to look for, one of which is immediately obvious. The second is something that people don't talk enough about. So the first one is you want to look at a company that's growing quickly. If you're on a rocket ship, your career is going to go up with the rocket ship, or the other cliche is, a rising tide raises all boats. And so really important to identify fast growing companies, especially if you're at a point in your career where you want to accelerate your career past the pace of what you've been going through and past the pace of sort of the average pace of growth for a product career. The second thing that people don't talk about is you want to look for a company that doesn't have a deep bench. Essentially, you want to look for a shallow bench. If you are at a fast-growing company and there is not a deep bench of talent, as opportunities come up, you're going to be plucked for those opportunities, and you're going to get the opportunity to grow. And so at TripAdvisor, I got that because the company had just been rolled out from Expedia. It was growing quickly. The team was really small. It was just like part of the team that got rolled out. And we knew we wanted to grow really quickly. And so I had this nice combination of fast growing opportunity, shallow bench, got a lot of opportunity along the way to grow disproportionately quickly. And I think if you look at every very successful product leader or product executive, you will see that there was a time in their career where both of these things were very true. They were in a fast-growing organization. There wasn't a deep bench around them. They took advantage of all of the opportunities that were created, and they used that to propel their career forward.
You're exactly right. Not enough people talk about the second point of deep career bench, and not actually having that and leveraging that as an opportunity.
And I think what's interesting is if you look at big tech, right, you kind of have, especially as these companies start to saturate in their growth, you have a company which isn't growing as quickly that has been recruiting really high-powered talent. And so you have an incredibly deep bench and a shrinking slate of opportunities. And then it becomes much harder to grow your career. Your career was going to grow along a very predefined path of a couple of years between every single rung in the ladder versus the alternative context, being in a company that's growing fast, being in a place that doesn't have that deep talent bench yet, you're going to be able to grow much faster. So, the road from senior PM to director might be 3 years or 5 years at a bigger company. It might be 12 months. It might be 6 months, depending on the company that you're at, if it's a smaller company that's growing quickly.
Perfect. So, let's move forward to Meta. First of all, how did you think about the decision to leave TripAdvisor and go to Meta as a director?
Yeah, so I think, I'd been working on TripAdvisor for about 5 years. We had shipped a number of really important initiatives. I'd gotten pretty deep in the travel space, but I was also feeling like there was something happening around the internet that I didn't fully appreciate. This was in the early days of the shift towards visual, video oriented content. So Instagram was growing really quickly around this time, Snap was growing quickly at this time. There was a lot more focus on social media. And I felt like at TripAdvisor, I was really focused on SEO and really focused on the travel use case, but I wanted to understand more deeply what's happening with younger users, what's happening really on the front lines of where we're going in terms of how people connect online. And so I had an opportunity to go to Meta to join a team focused on Gen Z. We're specifically trying to understand how does Gen Z engage with entertainment on the internet. And so I was looking at that both from a product strategy standpoint as well as a corporate development standpoint. We shipped a couple of initiatives. I also led the acquisition of TBH, Nikita's company. And so basically we were looking at how can we build up the talent base of people that understand Gen Z at Facebook, and how can we make sure that we have a clear understanding of what those needs are and figure out what's important for Facebook to build and what are okay things to yield to Instagram or others. We also did a lot of work around short format video and what was happening with what would eventually become TikTok in the US at the time. There was a lot of growth around Musical.ly. And so that was a period of my career where I had a much smaller team, and it was really about getting familiar with a new area that I just didn't have a lot of experience in. And I think that highlights a thing that's important for people to think about from a career standpoint. Career ladders are not necessarily linear. Several times in my career, I've gone from one title like a VP to a lower title like director. Several times I've had a bigger team and I've gone to a smaller team. And the important thing is not to optimize for the number or the shiny object, but really optimizing for the learning that you're getting along the way. And I don't feel like I'd have as deep an understanding of consumer social, of entertainment, of where consumer is going overall, were it not for that time at Meta as well as at Tinder.
Now you made that decision and you were like, what specific thing you were looking to learn more about? Were you looking to learn about the space or something else?
I was really looking to learn at the time about where consumer was going generally and where consumer social was going, because my entire career had been about consumer. TripAdvisor is a consumer company, but the type of work that we were doing day to day was really focused on the user-generated content model, which had been incredibly successful for TripAdvisor, but was more text-based, was more Web 2.0 than it was thinking about where things are going. And so the video sharing, the visual sharing that was happening on Instagram and Snap, I always thought would be interesting to bring to to the travel space, whether it was TripAdvisor or other places. But I just didn't feel like I understood it well enough. And going to Meta and being part of that team was a great way to get immersed in that and come to a better understanding of where things are going. And that really dovetailed nicely with Tinder. So Tinder was pulling on basically two threads: the scale of team that I had led at TripAdvisor, plus some of the Gen Z specific work that I had done at Meta, came in with both of those things being a key part of what I was building at Tinder. And a lot of my work at Tinder was focused on essentially Tinder 2.0, how to think about where dating and social discovery are going for Gen Z moving forward, because Tinder as a company had found product market fit very early on and had stayed really largely committed to that early product vision. And yet the users were changing, their needs were changing, and Tinder needed to change with it. And so a lot of the work that I did there was around not only sort of enhancing the product market fit that was already there and improving monetization, but also around thinking about where the next sources of product market fit would be.
These three roles that you mentioned, how did the challenges you faced and the skill sets you needed to tackle those changes change as you went from TripAdvisor to Meta to Tinder?
At TripAdvisor, the thing that the skills that I needed were, one, to move quickly. So TripAdvisor is a company where the motto is speed wins, and it was very much geared towards how do you figure out the shortest path forward and make sure that we're not building Rome before we figured out whether or not that's really the thing to build. So how to move quickly and how to do that at scale, both scale in terms of the product reach. There are hundreds of millions of people using TripAdvisor every month, as well as scale in terms of the team. Like how do you organize a team of product and engineering folks such that they can work quickly towards objectives that are really clear and iterative, but also strategic. And so at peak, my team at TripAdvisor was about 70 people, which across the different design engineering encompass product development resources or product development headcount of several hundred. And so we were working at scale across a large scope of responsibility. And it was really, and we were working with the goal of being really fast. And so it was important how to understand how to set strategy, how to define goals, how to coach great product managers, how to hire great product managers, and do that all at scale.
I love it. And now, how did that change at Meta?
At Meta, my team was much smaller, and it was really about understanding the problem, getting to the root cause of why is Gen Z moving away from Facebook? Because Facebook, it's hard to remember now, but it used to be the cool place to be. It started on college campuses, and every high schooler wanted a Facebook account. And that was changing pretty rapidly in 2017, 2018 timeframe. And so we wanted to understand why that was the case. And then based on that understanding, we wanted to be able to clearly articulate it and then figure out strategically what to do about it. So it was much more user research work, corporate development and strategy work than it was the team leadership. And I missed the team leadership. And that was one of the things that brought me to Tinder, where I got to combine the two, the strategic thinking about where the product could go, plus the large team that could have a large scope of responsibility and move quickly against those goals.
That's awesome. Great to see how the senior roles, the skill sets you need are very situational dependent. The challenges the company is going through at that point, you need to tackle those.
Absolutely.
Now, since then, you've written a lot, and you've especially the thing that we refer to often is your thoughts on product management career. When you think of today's market, where you see a fair number of layoffs, and it's a tight market, it's an employer-favored market. Companies are hiring, but maybe they want something more specific. What are your observations of product managers who succeed in this market, both in the search, but also as importantly in their career? And what are they doing that might be different than before, and what are things that are just evergreen that always work?
Yeah. So post Tinder, I made a decision to go earlier stage and to be closer to the building, and I wanted to do that for a few reasons. One of the key ones, I think, is that product management as a discipline, especially now, I think this is accelerating with AI. Is one where you can have PMs that are really focused on the stuff around the building of the product, but every great product leader that I've worked with doesn't go too high level or too abstract. They know that details matter, and they understand that as you get more and more senior, it's about having the dynamic range to both be thoughtful and opinionated about the details, as well as to think in a grand and aspirational way about the strategy. And so for me, I wanted to get closer to the building and work earlier stage as a result. And I think now in the job market, that's what we're seeing. The last couple of years have been really challenging in terms of companies realizing that they had layers of people, layers of management that they didn't necessarily need, and that they could remove those layers and not lose anything in terms of their pace of execution, not lose anything in terms of their speed. That doesn't mean, I think, and unfortunately, I think PMs have been part of this and maybe in the crosshairs of this. It doesn't mean that the product management job is important. If we think about product management really from a first principle standpoint, it's about understanding what a customer needs and then figuring out how to use that understanding to create value for the business. That is central to everything that a company does. But the way in which you do that, I think, has changed. And so I think the PMs that have been most successful in this new era are the ones that aren't afraid to build. They're not afraid to get their hands dirty. They're not afraid to talk to customers. They're not afraid to dive into the data, or wireframe things out, or even like, prototype type things, because they're honing their builder skills so that there's nothing standing in the way of getting to that really deep understanding and then being able to execute on what that customer wants. And the PMs who are more focused on the I say this word not pejoratively, but like the political aspect of product. Product is partly managing stakeholders, managing leading your team. There's nothing wrong with that. Working with people is an incredibly essential part of working in a company and being a successful product manager. And I think that the PMs who have the ability to both be hands-on and build with the product as well as work with people effectively are the ones that are best prepared to succeed in this new reality where there is less management layers, and as a result, PMs need to do more work that they might have thought about as IC work, but really is critical to delivering a great product.
Let's get one level deeper on the hands-on work. Do you mean like coding? Do you mean UX design? Tell me more. What are the kinds of hands-on work that a product manager should be doing?
Yeah, I've been doing everything because I love this stuff. So I've been coding. I've been getting better at Figma. I've been talking to customers. I like the details, and I think the details are really important. At the end of the day, the people experience our products through the pixels on the screen, and I think it's important for PMs to have opinions on what those pixels are. What does the copy say? What does the UX look like? What is the label on the button? All of these might seem like trivial implementation details, but in actuality, they are strategic questions, and often they don't get the attention that they need. And you could tell the difference between a product that is a result of a craftsperson that really cared about every aspect of this versus a product that was created on an assembly line where someone wrote a spec without thinking about how it's going to get built. Someone else built it, someone else launched it, someone else QA'd it, and someone else is doing user research on it. And it doesn't mean that every person needs to be good at all of these different things. I'm certainly not good at all of them or very many of them. But the fact that I've been able to get my hands on with these tools and start to really think about product in a more detailed way has helped me figure out what are the best things to do from a product strategy standpoint. And I think this is even more true with AI. Right now, AI is this kind of grand thing that's impacting product as a function. And I think the people that are going to be the most successful with it are ones who understand how AI works and think about it not as I'm going to drop a chatbot into my product, but as a set of really interesting Lego blocks, a set of really interesting machine learning capabilities that you can snap together in different ways to create product experiences that just couldn't exist before. And one of my favorite examples of this is a product we're using right now, which is Descript. Descript used the idea of being able to reliably transcribe voice into text to create an entirely new way of editing video. You edit video as it's a script, as if it's a script, rather than editing video on a timeline. And so for 30 years, Adobe Premiere looked the same as it did because the timeline that they created 30 years ago is the same timeline that we're using today. And Descript used a completely different model, a machine learning oriented model to rethink how videos are edited through a script. And I think we'll see, just like now we can edit a video as if it were still a script. I think in the future with video generation, we're going to be able to edit video as if we were still behind the camera, and being able to think about how learning capabilities actually change these fundamental user interactions is going to be a really important part of the product manager's job.
I love Descript. We were using it, and when I started it, I was like, that's not going to work. But when I started
it's such a great
using
product,
it and editing my videos as a document, I was like, wow, I can do so many things myself. It makes so many things easy for customers. It's truly a wonderful application of AI into a very real world problem, not just AI for AI's sake, right? I mentioned people just often throw it in, but this was a true amazing application. Now, Ravi, what else is going to change from a perspective of AI? How do you think it's going to affect product management careers, for example?
I think in terms of product management careers, there is this existential dread that somehow AI is going to put us out of business, and I don't think that's the case. So everything is going to move faster. Steve Jobs had this analogy. He said, a computer is like a bicycle for the mind, and the analogy there is that through your own energy as a human being, if you just give yourself a bit of machinery and a bit of gearing, you can actually move much faster. In the same way that computing is a bicycle for the mind, I think machine learning is a motorcycle for the mind. It's much faster than computers. You can do a lot more with it, but it's also has it's also not as safe, right? There's also risks associated with it, and I think that fact that this technology feels so fast and so risky is giving people this existential dread, which makes them pull back a little bit on what the capabilities are and how to use it in a really meaningful way. I think if you just pull the thread on it, it means that things are going to move faster. Engineers are going to be able to write more code. Designers are going to be able to create faster designs. People will be able to write copy faster. You'll be able to write content faster. And moving faster doesn't mean that work goes away. It just means you move faster. There's not a single PM in the world that feels like they would run out of good ideas if they could get through the roadmap faster. We all have like an infinite set of things that we want to do better. In fact, Jeff Bezos has this really good quote that he says, the thing that I love about customers is no matter what you do for them, they're always dissatisfied. And so it's not like we're going to run out of things to do because things are moving faster. We're just going to move faster on them. And I think what that means is actually the PM to engineering ratio is going to change. A PM might have been able to work with 10 engineers effectively before. Now a PM might only be able to work with 5 engineers because those 5 engineers are moving 2x or 3x faster. So I actually think it's going to be an advantage to PMs that the intuition, the strategic decision making, the alignment, the coordination, all of the things that product managers and product leaders do are just as important, if not more important, in an AI-driven world. And if everyone in the organization is moving faster on the execution, then it puts extra emphasis on the strategic pieces, the alignment, the communication to move quickly as well. And I think that's job security for PMs rather than a job risk.
I love it. And Ravi, you said one of the things that AI is going to enable more PMs, but the layers might go away, or layers might be reduced. So what about the people who are right on the cusp of group PM sort of levels, where there could be individual contributor, they're partially individual contributor, partially they are more starting to manage people? How should they think about their careers?
I think this is a really interesting question. I think it largely depends on what's going to make them fulfilled and where they're going to do their best work. And so if someone is looking at moving into a director level and the thing that they love is having a large scope of responsibility and working with a team and being able to set strategy across that scope, I think in this AI world, there's going to be more opportunities than ever to do that. And there will be opportunities to grow into them. If, on the other hand, someone says, I really love to stay close to the product and I want to be deep in this particular feature area or this particular domain area, I think there's going to be more opportunities to do that. And so over my career, I've sort of had different opinions about whether or not a 2-track product management model makes sense. Should you have 2 tracks in the same way that you have it for engineers, where you have people that are essentially more and more senior individual contributors, and you have other people that become more and more senior in terms of their scope of responsibility, in terms of their team? In the past, I felt like that probably doesn't make sense for product, but I think it's going to make more and more sense as AI becomes a bigger part of how we build products, because there will be really deep technical domain-oriented things that we need to do to build great products, where it makes sense to have a very senior principal product manager responsible for them. And there will also be things where you have a relatively small number of people that are moving quickly across a broad scope of initiatives, and you're going to need a great director level or VP level person to help them and support them in terms of creating value for the company as a result of that work. So I think understanding where you want to be in that 2-track model is really important. Understanding where you do your best work, and then plotting out your career with the idea of, based on that understanding, where do you want to go is really important.
I'm thinking back to like earlier you were talking about your career. I loved when you said that. Look, you weren't optimizing for team size. You went from VP to director, smaller team, but the opportunity was for learning and deepening your understanding of the sector, trends, Gen Z, and then continuing at Tinder. I think that's a very important thing for people to not be obsessed about, where, hey, I used to manage 5 product managers. Now I'm an individual contributor. Is that a demotion? I think people are a little over obsessed with that.
Yeah, it's really hard to, say, okay, I've gotten to a particular title and I've worked really hard for that. Or, I've grown my team to a certain size and I've worked really hard for that, to then feel like you're taking a step backwards by having some of those external aspects of what you do change. But at the same time, your personal fulfillment, your career growth is going to be directly proportional to the impact that you can make. And if you are, if your career is on the right track in the organization that you're in, and you could see sort of the long term there, then growing in terms of those things makes sense, right? Growing in the context of, I want to go more and more senior, I want to have a larger and larger team, makes total sense. But if, on the other hand, you're finding success in a different way, and you want to move quickly, or you want to be on the frontier of tech, or you want to solve tough problems with a small, really smart team, then you're defining success in a different way, and it's okay to move in a different direction. I think, everyone, and I think particularly within PMs, there's this battle between how we internally define success and how the outside world defines success. And oftentimes we get pulled into defining our own success based on what the outside world expects and wants. But that's a recipe for getting into a position where you may be ostensibly successful, but not feeling fulfilled every day. And I think the wonderful thing about being in tech, being in product, is it's moving so quickly that if you are growth oriented and you love to learn and you love to focus on new problems, that you can find different pockets to be successful, and you don't have to follow any specific path.
In this new AI world, what would you say are some of the skills that product managers should really equip themselves to succeed and do really well?
I think the first one is to really familiar yourself with the technology. So in the past, I don't think it's been that necessary to have a really deep technical understanding of all of the technical details in terms of how the web works or how mobile apps work. I think it helps, but it's a different set of skills. Now with AI, I think that has changed. It's going to be hard to know what's possible and how the pieces fit together without becoming somewhat fluent in what the different pieces are. That doesn't mean that you need to be able to build a large language model from scratch, although you can do that if you want. It does mean that you need to know what a large language model is. What are the mechanics of the architecture that's driving it? Why is it good at certain things? Why is it bad at other things? When OpenAI releases something new, like the Strawberry model that just came out that has advanced reasoning, it's helpful to understand, what is chain of thought prompting and how might that have influenced the way in which OpenAI approached that to be able to create an AI that is starting to look like it can reason. And so I think having that detailed technical understanding is important to know what all the pieces are, know how they fit together, know what the capabilities are. And then when you're creating a product, you can think about, what is the right approach here? Do we need to use a more traditional approach, or do we need to use a more machine learning approach? And I think right now we're in kind of like peak hype around AI. So, everyone is seeing problems as a nail and they've got a hammer. And so they're willing to hit on those problems. AI is the wrong solution for the majority of product that we need to build and the majority of features that we need to enable, but it is the very right solution for a small set of very valuable problems. And so being able to understand the difference between traditional computational systems and learning systems and when to use which, I think is a really important core capability that requires some technical fluency to do well.
Yeah. And back to like one of the things we were talking about earlier, it almost seems like some of the best applications of AI need some sort of a paradigm shift. or what we called at Google technical insight, where, okay, what if video editing was like editing a Word document? That goes back to the exact product we both love, Descript.
Absolutely. And before you might have asked that question 5 years ago and everyone would look at you cross-eyed like that's not possible. But now you can ask that question and those things are possible and reliable, but they work in very different ways. I had a post recently where I talk about the difference between learning systems and computation systems. And pretty much all of the innovation that we've seen over the last 50 years in computing comes out of the idea that you have an input, you have a set of rules, and you can very quickly, with a microprocessor, create a bunch of outputs. And so that simple rule has scaled to the point where now you can get video games that run at 60 frames per second, where they're doing trillions and trillions of lighting and shadow and physics and collision and narrative-based computations to create an experience that feels real. And so those systems are incredibly flexible, incredibly powerful. But the thing that we couldn't do up until recently is be able to solve a problem where we couldn't express the rules. And so if you wanted to say, is there a bird or a cat in this photo? You couldn't solve that computationally because the rules that we as humans use to figure out what animal is in a photo are not possible for us to express in code in a way that we can do clearly. And so that's where machine learning comes in. Machine learning can actually figure out the rules rather than us having to explicitly state them. And this gives rise to two very different types of systems that act in different ways. A computational system, the systems that we're used to dealing with, are deterministic. They do the same thing every single time, versus a learning system is probabilistic. It does a different thing every time. And as a product manager, that difference between determinism and a system that is more probabilistic is really key to how you create a feature that works or doesn't work for people, because the fact that an output is different every time might defy expectations. If you're creating something where you are calculating the solution to a math problem, you don't want the answer to be different every time. Or it might be a feature if you're creating image generation where you want to create a lot of different variants. And so these like different properties between learning systems and computational systems are important to understand and important to be able to factor into how you approach product development.
I did an experiment with an AI system, and I was like, let's test it out. So there's a product called Photo.ai where I uploaded a few images and created a virtual model of myself, and then have it generate a bunch of images, and then I had generate a image of me speaking at a conference, and I sent it to my family WhatsApp channel. And I was like, hey, this is just from recent conference. Everybody's like, we're proud of you. That's amazing. You're doing so well, all these things. And it's full of messages. I woke up in the morning and the messages were there. And I was like, oh, crap. I told them, look, I've been doing a lot of conferences, podcasts, all these other things. But just so you know, this was completely fake. Here's a picture of me with 3 kittens. Here's a picture of me on my jet. People were like, oh, the only difference they could really tell was they thought maybe I had gotten Botox on my forehead because it just looked incredibly smooth. But other than that, they couldn't tell anything. It's amazing what these systems can do.
It's amazing what these systems are capable of.
Really cool stuff. Awesome. One last topic. One last main question. When you think of product managers and you're not in this market of 2024, you are in this market of 2024, 2025, you're looking to grow up a level in your career. You've thought a lot about AI as well. What are the things they should be doing?
I think the biggest advice is to assess yourself and kind of understand where you do your best work. Product management is an impossibly broad discipline now. It's not unlike engineering in the early days. Everyone was a full stack engineer because you could know all of the things about engineering and be able to build workable software. Today, specialization is incredibly important in engineering. You have people that are front-end specialists and back-end specialists and machine learning specialists and who work on game engines and who work on embedded systems. There's way too much scope in engineering for any person to know all the things equally well. The same is true of product. It's just that, some of the skills are a little bit softer, so it's hard to really wrap your hands around that. But it is true. And the degree to which you can pin down on these degrees of freedom and know where you're strong and where you want to focus is really helpful. And then once you have some of those degrees of freedom pinned down, you can then figure out what are the set of opportunities that you want to explore. I worked with someone at Tinder who was just a fantastic customer service rep, and her dream was to become a product manager, but she only wanted to become a product management manager for the trust and safety team. She had no desire at all to work on user facing features or any other part of the Tinder product. She wanted to work on trust and safety. And the fact that she had that clarity was great because it was something that really dovetailed nicely with her talent. And the fact that she knew that's where she wanted to focus was also great because that was an often overlooked area. So many PMs at Tinder want to work on the front end product, not on the back end systems. But from a business standpoint, it's actually the back end systems in many cases that are the most important driver of business results and customer satisfaction. So that focus gave her a leg up. And it's similar to anyone who's thinking about your product management career. If you know where you're strong and where you do your best work and what you want to focus on, that can give you an unfair advantage when you're looking for your next role.
I was saying in our program, we refer to it as the angle of mastery. And recently just started working with someone who's, discovering this person's standard pitch. And they could just be like, oh, I'm an accomplished product leader with so many years of experience across these sectors. Like the more we dig in, the more it was like, what you're really good at is you can take products with at least some product market fit, and you can get them to scale to 10 million, 100 million users in the B2C space. You've done it many times. That's your skill set. You love doing it. Let's put that as your core positioning rather than accomplished product leader with so many years of experience. And that's exactly what people should be doing. Now, that's so different. That's so much more different than another accomplished product leader with many years of experience.
Absolutely. And if that thing that you're strong at is overlooked in an organization or in the industry, even better, because you can come in and create value. I think, as an industry, we flock to a lot of things. A while ago it was Web3, now it's AI. And so, to go back to what we were talking about earlier, if you can go into a space that's growing quickly, where there's not a deep bench, that's a great place to grow. And that doesn't necessarily need to be an entire company. That could be a subset of a company that is going through some really significant growth and where they just don't have enough people who are really deeply thoughtful working on that particular area.
Where can people find out more and learn from you? Where do you put out your amazing content?
Yeah, absolutely. You can go to ravimehta.com. So it's just ravi-mehta.com. And I have some articles there. I also have a Substack if you want to search out for that. I'm starting to write more frequently. And so would love for you to follow that. And then, feel free. I'm pretty accessible. So comment on the post, or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. So if I can be helpful at all, please reach out.
Please keep writing, Ravi, because we've always been big fans of it. I really appreciate you coming to the podcast and sharing your thoughts with my awesome audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Hey, be sure to check out our website at intentionalproductmanager.com to see how you can level up in your career.